Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we are with a very special guest, Kash Rocheleau with Icon Foods. Kash, thanks so much for being here today. I'm so excited for our conversation. We're going to be talking about leadership and all sorts of different things within that. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself for people who may not know who
Thank
you
you
are?
so much for having me this morning. So, my name is Kash Rocheleau, and I recently took over as CEO of Icon Foods, where I sat as the CFO for quite a few years before that. My background is business finance, corporate finance. I have a husband that I've been married to for almost 15 years, and we have 3 little children that we are raising in this crazy world.
And those children can be all sorts of random things. We were talking right before this, maybe not always the, sweet little angels that we want them to be, but that is all the nuance and complexity of being a parent and a business person and all of
All
the
of the
things.
things. All of the things. We call them little Sour Patch Kids because they are certainly sour one moment and sweet the next moment. But I'm grateful for them. I mean, even in the challenging days, because I think being a parent, specifically a mom, I don't have experience being a dad, but being being a mom, definitely there are a lot of similarities and things you can carry over into your professional world, and carry a lot of empathy and compassion in how you handle things by raising people that you don't always have control of, even though you think you do.
It's a really good way to say that. And I think that even so many, I have friends who are stay at home moms who are like, I don't know that I have business experience. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? You are a project manager. You are the CFO of your family. Oftentimes you are doing negotiations and, whether maybe it's not a salary negotiation, but you are definitely negotiating all sorts of things every single day, managing all of the different aspects, so much of being a stay-at-home mom in particular. Like, no, that's just you're running the whole dang
Yep.
company, all of it, top to
Yep.
bottom.
Absolutely.
I love that.
You nailed that one. I don't need to add anything to that. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I had an opportunity to be a stay at home mom. I wanted kids so badly. My husband and I had quite a bit of infertility before we had our first, and it just kind of exacerbated the fact that I wanted to stay home. And the first 7 months I was able to. I could have continued. I just personally didn't get the fulfillment out of it. But that's not to, minimize anyone that chooses to stay home, because like you said, it is a full time job and you don't get paid to do it.
I think I'm really glad you brought that up. And this is not where we kind of thought this was going to go exactly. But I remember when I had much younger kids. And when I started, well, I bought the business while I was pregnant with my third. And then we had a pretty hard pivot. I'd started a company within our company when the kids were like, second through eighth grade ish. And I was just chatting with someone, a fellow mom, and I said, oh my gosh, preschool was the longest prison sentence I ever served. And they were like, and it looked like I had freed them from mental jail by just that one sentence, because they were like, I don't love this. And it's supposed to be this thing that, and isn't it a blessing that I get to stay at home, and I hate my life. And then I'm not supposed to hate my life, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. And I think it's a little more commonplace now with the internet and TikTok and Instagram that people do talk about it a little more openly. But I think there is an element where I tried to stay home for a few years, and some of that was economics. And at one point my husband was like, honey, I think that childcare will be cheaper than therapy. And I'm talking therapy for the children. Because he just knew that wasn't my gig. So anyway, I just anybody that's out there living in the stay at home prison dream, dream prison, if it is your thing and you are happy doing it, do it. Love it. Do not feel bad about yourself. And I try really hard to ask people, women especially, do you work outside the home? Because working inside the home is a freaking full-time job. And if you don't love it, do not feel guilty about that. I think that's the thing. Mom guilt. It's like if I stay at home, I feel guilty that I'm not building my career. And if I'm building my career, then I'm guilty anyway. So all that to say, Cash, I really enjoyed when we got to chat. You have some really kind of related to this, how you like to build and pour into younger women specifically and younger leaders. And so I know that we're going to get to that, but you helped a company go through a transition where you went from CFO to CEO. And I think a lot of our audience is more of smaller companies. We're not the big giant Walmarts, even though we live down the road from them. But I think it's a really interesting story. So can you just share a little bit about that journey with Icon Foods and sort of how you helped that leadership transition and what that process was like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it really kind of starts with that whole stay at home mom situation. Like I said, I was awarded the opportunity to do this, and about 7 months in, there was just this building resentment within my marriage. Like, and I don't think my husband knew. Just kind of a husband going through the day thinking that he's giving his wife all of the things, but he would come home from work just dog tired from talking to people all day long, and I was dog tired from negotiating with an infant all day long. And so I was like yearning for some adult interaction, and he's like, that switch is off for the day. And so I finally just kind of cracked. I'm like, I gotta go back to work. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't really have any, like you had said earlier, I don't really have any skills. So what am I going to do? He was completely supportive, like much like you said, Angela, and you know, probably going to be cheaper to send you back to work than it is to get you the therapy you're going to need if we continue to do this dynamic that we're doing. And so Icon Foods had a post for an executive assistant to the CFO, and I had a business degree at the time, very general business degree. I didn't really have finance experience outside of the finance 101, finance 201 that I had to take through my undergrads. But in my mind, I'm thinking kind of similar to what you said, Sammy. If I could manage like the chaos of my house, I likely could manage the chaos of a CFO. Like that's my mindset, very naive. Um, but much to my surprise, the CFO at the time was this like gentle, kind-hearted female that just was a mother herself, and just very graceful and compassionate, and had a lot of grace in my learning the business world and the finance world. And so I really took to the finance side of things, loved everything about it, which was surprising because I hated math going through my undergrad. And about 4 months into this whole endeavor of me being in the business world, me being in the finance world, she had mentioned that she was moving back to Hawaii to tend to some personal family matters, and we just were not set up to be a remote company at the time. And in this 4 months, I truly don't know what I did other than just being myself, which I think sometimes is just being a crazy person. But I had built a lot of rapport with her and with the founder. And she had basically sold to the founder that I could run this finance department with, her as a phone call away mentor, and the business being as small as it was. At that time, we were about a $9 million company, which still to me seems crazy that they were going to let someone like run the finance department of a $9 million company 4 months into their career. It's just a little mind blowing to me at this point in time. But my mindset in that was this is an opportunity. You've got to take it, because if you let this go, who knows when your next opportunity has come. It's very unconventional, but this is the story that is laid out for you. And so it was a very much sink or swim. Like you're getting thrown into this tank, and you don't know everything. You've got to just know that right now you don't know everything. And you've got to be willing to reach out to connections, to network, to lean into the mentors that you have surrounding you. And the experience itself was overwhelming, but it forced me to learn the business, the department, the industry very fast, because there was no other options. And so about 3 years into this, I felt like I started to catch my stride, really started to understand the business. And our founder at the time had said, in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be ready to kind of step out, and I can see you being our next successor to run the company. And that time frame made sense. Like, I've been in this for 3 years. I've kind of gotten my stride, still a lot to learn, but 3 to 5 years seems really doable. And about 6 months later, he was in a meeting with the sales team, and there was some conversation. He's very old school, so very much sir, Mrs., ma'am, madam, until you have the permission to call them by their name or whatever they want to be called. And one of our salespeople said, "I'm not going to do that." And I think it was one of the very first times that someone so new that didn't have a lot of rapport with him had really point blank pushed back. And he was very caught off guard. He said, "What do you mean you're not going to do this?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm not going to call someone sir or Mrs. or ma'am or until I know their pronouns." And that was a massive turning point, because now you've got these dynamics of generational gaps, right? We're starting to see the very new millennial, Gen Z, Gen Xers in the room versus the older generation. And he came out of that meeting, I would say, not as calm as the conversations were later down the road, but that was the switch for him to say, like, I don't feel like I am the right person to be running this company anymore, because the way that I want to run a business or have ran a business is not conducive to the way the business world is going. And so that 3 to 5 year timeline moved to, I'm stepping down in May. And this meeting happened in September. And so at that point, very compassionately, we had a conversation, and this was not our original timeline. We can fast track this. I still believe that you can do this, or we need to find someone, because I'm pretty dead set on the fact that we need the right person in the right seat running the company. And again, I kind of reflected back on, a couple years previous, and it's like, this is an opportunity that's not going to fall in your lap maybe ever again. And if it does, it's going to take a lot longer than this period of time. And so I was certainly interested. So we started putting together a transition plan over the next couple of weeks, and the transition, I would say, also being a little unconventional, was the fact that he was going to stay involved in the day-to-day for at least the first year. He has a very science background, so he moved into Chief Innovations Officer position, really driving forward our R&D and innovation side of the business, as well as holding a seat on the board. So still very active in helping me in some of the historicals of the business, and kind of navigating through some of the business world things as they come to my lap for the first time, but also very open in I put you in this seat because you're part of this generation. So while I can give you some of my advice, my mentorship, you really have to pave the way for yourself and really kind of experience some of these failures and be okay failing. And again, a lot of the things that he did and said, very unconventional, which kind of is a theme here. But there's not many founders that I feel are humble enough or can put an ego aside to say, I'm not the right person for my business. And so I feel like I've had to have a lot of grace in that, in comparing it kind of to motherhood. Like when my kid leaves the nest, there's a piece of my heart walking away from me. And so I've tried to have some compassion in this can't be an easy decision for him, but also super grateful that he has allowed me to make those mistakes, which also makes me feel responsible to pass that on to the people below me, the people that are likely going to take my seat eventually, and the people that they're ultimately mentoring and will take their seat. Very long winded, but.
Oh, no, I'm blown away because I got snippets of this story, and so I loved the detailed version. So thanks, audience, for sticking with this because there are so many lessons to be learned. And we talk a lot around here about family-owned business. We have a deep connection to emotion in business, which is why we chose family business to be kind of our focus. Is it allows us to bring those two. And wow, I just think as a first generation business owner who has got the second generation business leader right behind me, um, there's so many lessons that can be learned from the whoever's in leadership and as they're getting ready for that next generation. And the one that jumped out at me is the idea of him giving you permission, not just allowing, but really writing you a permission slip. You are going to fail and you need to fail. And I think there is so much pressure on the younger generation specifically that you can't fail. And like, oh, or you can't try this thing that I tried because I already tried that and it didn't work. And so like one of the things that I'm super proud of myself is that I will say to Sammy when she says, I think we need to try this thing. And I said, you can try this thing, but I'm not going to pay for you to make the exact same mistake I did. So you have to listen to me tell you the story and I'm going to tell you the gruesome gory details, and that's the payment that you have to do is you have to listen to what I did, all those experiments I ran and how it didn't work and how much it cost me. And now I want you to design your experiment and tell me if you're going to try the exact same thing I did, how is it going to be different so that and it could be like there's so many things that have changed, right? Like technology is very different. We didn't have when I started in 2008, I was convincing people they needed a website, right? And so now, like, there's a whole they weren't even sure if they needed a website. And in some ways, people are back to that. I don't even know if I need a website, right? And so I'm like, I try really hard to say, you are allowed to fail. As long as I get to tell you the story of how I failed so you can
Yeah.
make a new mistake. And what's sweet is that I have a daughter who is like, teach me. I don't want to skin my knees. I want to avoid the potholes you did so I can make new mistakes. But the second thing I love about that is that the intentionality that you chose to say, and similar to what I'm doing, I want to teach the younger people this is, oh, look, I made this mistake. Let me teach you. Maybe is there an example that you could give us, like, that you have been able to, like, share something with a younger person or somebody else that you like, "Oh, I made this mistake, and please let me tell you the story so you can do
Yeah.
something different."
So as I was kind of catching my stride as the CFO, I brought in a assistant controller and we put together a developmental plan for her to ultimately step into the controller's seat and down the road take my seat, which, I think again for that, I hate talking about age, but for that older generation, I think that there was a fear in like teaching the younger generation or even using the language of like taking my seat. And when I
Mhm.
brought her along, I was very intentional in I want you to take my seat because if I don't have someone prepared to take my seat, then I'm limiting my own ceiling, right? And so I think
Yes.
that there's a lot of fear in someone being able to take your role. But even today, I'm looking for my next CEO. They're likely not going to take it for a few years. I mean, I'm not certainly not comfortable in my seat, but I would like to keep it warm for a little while longer. But with that said, now that I've hit this place, like I want there's now more. Like I'll very type A want
Yeah.
more, but specifically with this assistant controller, I kind of refused and pushed back on the board to hire a CFO in my place because I want to give her the opportunity. It's going to take a little bit more time than we were anticipating based on everything that transpired. But one specific example is actually just a couple months ago when we were doing budgeting for 2025. She said, can you tell me how you did it? And a little different than you, Angela, I have a different approach with my team. I said, nope, I'm not going to tell you how I did it. I'm not going to give you my
Mm.
spreadsheets. I'm not going to, you have to do this. That's what I did. Once you do yours and you present it, I will give you mine and you can let me know which works better. My mindset in that is that if I give them my work, if I give them all of my failures, they kind of again walk down that path. And I don't want to
Yep.
be a limiting factor in,
Yep.
I had roadblocks, I had potholes, I had things that I had to get around, but is their road going to be the exact same to get to that spreadsheet? And
Right.
I don't believe it is. And I'm a firm believer now, maybe not so much then when my mentors were pushing into me to make failures, but I'm a firm believer that you learn more in the failures, the roadblocks, the potholes than you do in the successes. When you have a
Hmm.
success, I feel like you pop a bottle of champagne or whatever it is you choose to partake in, you have a nice dinner, and then the next day, life is as it is, right? When you hit a
Yes.
failure, typically does not happen like that as overcoming it. And so you're forced to kind of sit and reflect like, how did I get here? How am I going to get out of it? How am I going to prevent getting here again? And so
Mm. I love
when
that.
I'm mentoring some of these younger generations or people behind me, I want them to go through some of those same roadblocks, potholes that I did, and
Mhm.
hope that they pull some of those same things out. Um, and I'm very lucky that she has kind of embraced reluctantly those failures. She wants kind of the easy road. Like, why would I create my own budget when you've already done the work? Well, because my work is not
Mm.
going to be your work.
I I
I think
also
that's a
think
little different. Yeah.
well, I also think that when you first did it, the problems that you faced,
Mhm.
you came up with, okay, well, A plus B equals C because this is the problem I'm facing. Doing the work again, she may not actually face that problem. And it could be that there is a better way to do it, knowing that that's not there. So it's the it's a silly story, but I heard somebody once that every time their family made a ham, they would cut off both the ends and then put it in
Yes.
the oven. And for years and years, they would cut off like big chunks of the ham on either side. And sometime somebody asked her, like, what are you doing? Why are you cutting those off? And they're like, I don't know. That's just what my mom always did. They call mom and they're like, I don't know. That's what my mom always did. They call grandma and she said, I had a small oven and I had to cut off the ends of the ham to fit it into my size oven. And so then for 2 generations, they've been wasting the pieces of the ham because even though they had bigger ovens. And so whatever problem you had when you made it, that problem may not exist and you could be eating a full ham
Yep.
for lack of a better metaphor.
You make a really good point in if I give in terms of the controller, if I give her my budget, is she going to be able to explain to the next generation how we got there? That's also a piece in my mind is, can they explain how they got here? And to your point on the ham
Mhm.
situation, if I pass down the budget, and she has questions or doesn't answer them or doesn't see issues with how it's put together, she passes it down to the next controller, and the controller's like, well, why do we account X percentage here? My controller now is going to say, I don't know, this was passed down to me. Whereas if she does the work, creates it for herself, she can answer those questions, or she can choose to make that next controller do it their way. So I think
Mhm.
that there's value. I would say if there is a fatal mistake, Angela, I definitely follow kind of your track. Like if there's something that's going to for sure hit a roadblock and cause turmoil for more than just that person or that department, be detrimental
Yeah,
to the company or other
agree.
departments, I certainly will
Yeah.
give feedback and precaution, kind of that payment of here, you have to hear me out. But by and large, I try to let them make those mistakes. And I think the other
Love
reason
it.
for that is we have a generation, and I'm on the tail end of the millennial generation, but we've got the millennials, the Gen Xers, the Gen Zers who are in this technology era, and I'm raising betas. I just found out over the weekend that are really going to boom the technology beyond what we can even imagine right now. And I think social media has played such a role in mental health and kind of the anxieties that we're seeing in the younger generations. And there's this fear of making mistakes or failing, and you're not seeing all of that on social media. You see a lot of the good and not a lot of the bad. And so my hope in this is also to create some normalcy out of failure. It's okay to fail. It's a part of the journey.
Yes.
It's a part of the process. And if you're not failing, you're not growing. And so,
Mhm.
it sounds a little sick, but I want them to fail, and I want them to feel comfortable failing. And if I don't give them opportunities where I know they're going to fail, how else are they going to get comfortable with failing?
I love that so much. And I think there's a little bit of a nuance because from my perspective, what you were talking about is a tactical thing. Um, where it's like you need to understand how this is put together. For me, it's often more of what you're talking about, like, hey, can we spend X number of dollars on this thing? And it's like, right, but how are you going to make sure that we get a return on that investment? Here's what I did, here's what I tried. Now you show your work. I think besides the younger generation having a hard time with failure, which is understandable also because we have parents that have got their own identity wrapped up in whether or not my child is doing well, right? And so I'm getting kudos because my kid is awesome, and then I'm feeling bad about myself as a parent if my kid is not doing awesome in life. And I think so it's double whammy, right? It's both generations. It's the generation that is afraid to fail, and it's the parents that are afraid to look bad because their kid fails. And I think as a leader, you have to be strong enough to say, I'm willing to let you skin your knees, assistant comptroller. I'm okay. I'm gonna be your safety net. And I'm gonna cultivate a culture in my company that you can fail. And because then I know you're growing and I know you're learning, and we're not only doing the slam dunk surefire things. And if I think I would probably be a little more concerned if my daughter never came to me with things that I had tried, right? And I didn't need to tell those stories, then that would also be an indicator, like, is she thinking of different things? And so I like the idea of pushing the envelope. I also want to give kudos one more time to your founder, and recognizing his strength was the innovation, was the science, and was probably would have been, if you would have had to learn that side, would have taken way more than 3 to 5 years, right? Whereas the business, like, it sounds so I think that's beautiful to fill in that gap and go, "Look, this is where I'm super strong." And his science background is gonna be, like, really gonna build the company. So I also wanna just kudos to that, because because we talked about his humility, but it took a strong leader also for him to step back. And it's funny because like it's kind of the dream, right? You build a company that then you don't have to be the one running it day to day. But yet then so that's supposedly the dream that we all have. And then when it comes to the point where you need to let that go and you need to turn over the day-to-day ops, so it gives you a little more flexibility, it gives you a little more freedom. We get our egos wrapped up in it. And as the senior generation leader, I mean, right now it is so fresh. So you keep saying Gen X. I'm Gen X, and baby boomers will not let go. Like, oh my god, you guys, I get it that you're feeling fulfilled in these senior leadership roles, but quit milking the salary until you are like 5 years past retirement. We just had this in major leadership in our city, and you're like, you're not we're gonna miss a whole generation. My generation is not going to get to be in these senior leadership because we're so close behind and they're working later, which is beautiful and amazing. But take a step back. Like I had a friend that retired and then he went to work for another company in like a support kind of role. Now he's mentoring, now he's business development. But golly, baby boomers, I love y'all. Get out the way. So, I'm glad we got millennials that we can trust to because Jen, you're just gonna have to will hopefully
Well,
not
and I think
be
there's a
bitter and
balancing act
angry.
in there, right? Because I do agree with you that the boomers have hung around for quite some time, but I also think that the millennials coming in, and this is the difficulty for me. You've got the boomers who really went through their careers in this, I say natural progression, but natural progression in moving, they held a role for between 3 to 10 years before they were elevated, right? And we've got the millennial generation, and I again attribute a lot of this to social media because you see only the good with social media, but um, you have the millennials coming in with some of these unrealistic expectations. They come in and just for the sake of being in the accounting conversation. They come in as an accountant, and a year later they want to be a controller, and a year later they want to be a CFO, and a year later they have these unrealistic expectations of moving up. And I think a lot of that, again, social media being so instantaneous. Like you post something, you get a like right away. You post a message, you get feedback right away. You post a story, you get feedback right away. And the business world just doesn't seem to be moving fast enough for them. And so you're seeing a lot of turnover with the millennials because you're not moving as fast as they want. And so while I do agree that the boomers have to get out of the way, I think that they're bringing some stability that the millennials are not bringing to us right now.
That's interesting since you were 4 months in and you got to be CFO from a executive assistant. But what I like is you're saying there wasn't an expectation for you. There was actually like a, "Oh gosh, this is a little bit overwhelming," because people could say, "Well, yeah, it's easy for you to say we're not being patient. You didn't have to be patient." And then 3 years later, you're the CEO, so you didn't have to be patient. But, I just always love to play devil's advocate. No, go ahead, Sammy.
Well, I think that the one of the things that's also complicated within that is that I have some friends who are within corporate world that there's both. There is an expectation that they want to move quickly, they want to grow, they want to do those things. And when you're in a job or in a company where all of your senior leadership positions have been filled by people who've been there for 10 to 15 years, who are gonna be there for another 10, 15, 20 years, and they're like, "Yep, I've hit my ceiling and I'm delighted to stay right here." Sometimes if you can't even see, here's my path, if you don't have that leader saying, "Hey, I wanna grow you intentionally so that it's gonna take 3 to 5 years and you're gonna be an accountant for 5 years and then you're gonna get to go do this," it can be hard without that vision for what the future is, especially in a company where you've got people who are like, "No, I don't wanna replace my seat. That would be the worst thing ever." When I was corporate, that was a huge commonality, is this fear that if I teach information, I'm gonna lose a job, and I just remember being so caught off guard. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect people to be So, well, I and my time in my early 20s, I was like, "They're being so selfish." It 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 wasn't necessarily that they were on purpose trying to be selfish, but it is a different perspective, to try to teach everybody and be like, if I can when you become the trainer who can replicate yourself, you actually do become more valuable than just being the person who can hold that seat. And I feel like I saw that instantly, and then I'm the young 20 something who's trying to like teach and learn and do all these things, and people were like, "You're just trying to steal my job. You wanna take over for my position and get me fired." I was like, "Not not at
I'm not
all."
even
Like,
interested in your job.
I'm not actually interested in your job, and but it's interesting just the way that business used to be, and that I think that the rules are changing in a lot of ways, and so, like your founder sort of identified, this isn't necessarily the game that I know how to play. I'm gonna step out. There are a lot of people who, instead of saying, I'm gonna step out, they're like, no, I'm just gonna cling really, really tightly to the old way of doing things, the way that I know. And in those situations, I see friends who will be like, yeah, I'm gonna spend a year to two and I'm out because this isn't the way that I want to do business. This isn't the way that I feel like I'm gonna be growing in my career. And at that point, it's kind of hard to fault somebody, especially when you have an opportunity. You could go to another company that somebody is going to
Yeah.
mentor you and grow you and give you all of those skills.
I think
That's
you
not
make
so
a really
limiting.
good point there in the it's got to be bilateral, right? You've got to have a mentor that is willing to sit down and put together developmental plans with you, and not only put them together but follow through on them, right? And so for example, with my assistant controller, we've put together a 3 to 5 year developmental plan, and in that, part of it is she's got to go back and get her master's in finance and accounting. She's got to find a coach that can kind of come alongside her. I'm definitely there in the day to day, but to be able to mentor as a CFO to her, that's not in my capacity at this point. And so there's steps in this developmental process that she's got to do. I know what her end goal is. I've helped her create that path, but now the ball is in her court, right? So now she's got to come to the table, and she's agreed to this developmental plan. If she doesn't go back to school, I can't help you, right? We've agreed on this. And I think, to your point, that's where there is a lack in some of this. You know, even in my own developmental plan, there's most days that I'm like, what the hell am I doing in this seat? Like, I should not be here. But I think in that, there was a developmental plan put together. It was very much fast tracked. There were things that I had to do in order to make that succession as seamless as possible. And there's still things that I have to do with the board. You know, as a young new CEO, they're completely aware, as am I, that my development is an ongoing process. And while they're there to help contribute to what that plan looks like, ultimately I have to put the work in. And if I'm willing to put the work in, then they're going to continue to mentor. So it's kind of this team of, we're both pouring sand into the base, but it's got to be that. It can't be one person pouring in and over promising and saying, yeah, you got your steps done to be the CFO, or completely qualified, but there's just not a place for you. I think there are times that that's going to happen, but this is where the responsibility of that mentor comes in. If they're not willing to step aside for that, then they need to help them find a landing place where they can
Right.
um, flourish. And it may not be with that company, but
Yeah.
again, there's multiple ways to kind of set the ego aside and to deliver on your promises. So um,
One of the tactics, I would say, I don't even know if it's strategies, one of the strategy tactics that I was taught early, I did get a coach when I started our marketing agency in 2008, because what I know is that when we first bought the business and the first time I stepped out of being a stay-at-home mom, I was a workaholic. I, like, got a lot of my, value from, the sale and from feeling good about all of that, and so when I took a step back to say, "Okay, I need to refocus on being a mom for a couple of years," and then decided I had to return to, work, I was like, "I want to not be a workaholic, so how do I do this more sustainably?" I'm not saying that I accomplished that trip through I learned more lessons, but my coach had a deep background in HR, and so she knew I didn't wanna grow this giant company, and she said, "You have to create a development plan for people to be able to move up." And so, like, from early on, even when we only had 6 people, we had drawn out a org chart for if we had a fully formed org chart and every role was filled. And then we said, if you fill a role and the roles below you aren't filled, you have to cover those roles, which is normal. It was a small company, right? But we identified those positions that we needed, even if we never intended to actually have, so we could understand this person is doing this. And so sometimes I would say to staff, like, okay, you're going to cover these roles, but then if I hire somebody, I want you to pick and choose what you like. What do you enjoy? So since you're first in, you get to decide which ones of those things. So that's one thing I did, is that if you had to do more than graphic designer, also had to answer the phones, right? And so when the one graphic designer was like, "I hate answering the phones, it's so distracting." Okay, great. Well, then when we hired, a bookkeeper on site, they also got to answer the phones. But I also did, for our longtime graphic designers, we had positions. So they started as a junior graphic designer. And after a year or two, when they got skill set, then they became a graphic designer. And then they became a senior graphic designer. And you didn't have to be supervising other people to be a senior. And then you could be a junior art director. And then you could be an art director. And so we actually designed something so that when you're on LinkedIn, even if you were with a company, and we have a designer who's been with us for 9 years, and there is progression on LinkedIn, and salary increases and all of those things, because we made sure and intentionally gave her that progress. Also gave them supervisory experience by, when we had mentors or interns. I say all the time, we own the marketing agency, we're a teaching hospital, and so that means that you're gonna make mistakes and we're gonna practice, and so nearly every intern says their favorite thing about working at the Belfort Group has been that they do real work. They don't just answer the phone. They don't just, but they do real actual work, sometimes first week. And it really is, I think it's instrumental in developing people. And so it's about a mindset. And I think that as an older generation, I had that mindset. I don't even know where I got it, but I can remember all the way back in college, I was always looking for, if I was in a leadership position, who's going to come and replace me. And maybe because in college, you're leaving, right? So you have to grow the next leader. I was in residence halls. I knew I was moving off campus, so I had to. So maybe that was where it got kind of the seed planted. But I think that if I just my kind of closing thoughts as we wrap this up for the older generation is to look at the opportunity to, um it is very fulfilling to see somebody that you have gotten to mentor and to pour into, and if you can possibly work on your own insecurity and your own self-confidence so that you can potentially, give them what they need so that they can flourish. And I love running into somebody that has worked for us that are like, "I have skill sets that I would not have had." I bumped into a fellow CEO in the community, and she's like, "I love if somebody says they interned at the Belford Group, we hire them because I know that you have put them through the paces." That is so fulfilling to me. It may not and, here you are 25 years later in business. I can tell you what I made in revenue on year 4 doesn't stick with me, but the people that I changed their life and the people that I gave them that first 2 years experience out of college, and that now, like, if I bump into them or I see them on LinkedIn or I see their new position, that stuff, like, that's what That's what stays with you, and that's what will make this all worthwhile. So, if you're feeling, that I've seen a lot of statistics on how we're feeling lonely and disconnected and hopeless, this is the way. And I have such high hopes for Gen Z. I really, really do. Maybe because I have raised my youngest is a Gen Z, but they just need guidance. We can't assume that they have a base level. We can't assume that they know they're supposed to return every phone call and return every email. We have to stop assuming that they were taught stuff and just go, okay, well, this is the culture. And we can be mad and bitter that they don't do it the way we would do it, like the Mr. and Mrs. and ma'am and sir, except that then she had a really good reason of why she didn't wanna do that, and so I think we can learn from them, and also we can build them and develop them, and stop with the hopeless crap of this generation. Oh my gosh. Well, guess what they said about the kids that were turning 18 in the early '70s? Ah! The same thing. Every generation freaks out about the kids turning 18 to 20. Maybe just recognize that 18 to 24-year-olds still figuring out their life. They don't even have a whole brain. Anyway, this has already gone on longer than we like. So, Cash, let us know. This is amazing conversation. So, give us what's your parting wisdom for
I don't know, you
people?
did a really good job in just it is super fulfilling, and I know I say this as a younger female, but my founder has repeatedly told me that before I succeeded that my fulfillment was going to come from my people, and that I would not be able to get to any summits without the people around me, and to not discredit them. And in this first year, I have seen so many successes. And to your point, I have a pulse on what revenue is. I don't know what it is month to month. I couldn't even tell you what we officially closed in December. But I certainly can reflect back and get so much joy and fulfillment out of the successes and growth of the people that work for me have overcome or experienced. So I really couldn't have said it better myself, but I would certainly say mentor. Like, do not be scared to mentor. I don't care how old you are, whether you are a boomer or a beta. Mentor the people below you, above you, aside you, and cheer them on. Don't compare yourself. Like you said, it's easy for me to say that the journey's not always going to be fast, as I had a very fast one, but cheer me on just like I would cheer you on. And because
Yep.
that summit is going to be so lonely if you don't have people with you at the top. You're going to be celebrating alone. And if you've ever popped champagne alone, you will understand how lonely that is.
I can't wait to pull that out as a reel when you said that. When we do, that is how we celebrate. We reach a
Mm-hmm.
moment of success and then we keep going. And those failures and how they transform us, like, ugh, that is gold, man. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
so
being
much for
here.
having me.
Thank you. Cash, if people wanted to connect with you, learn more, have more conversations, how could they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is the best place. I'm pretty active
Okay.
on there. I try to get back to everyone that messages me. If you're selling me something, you're probably lower on the priority list. But anyone that reaches out to talk about any of these topics, I make it a priority to get back to and have those conversations. So LinkedIn would be the best way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Share with your friends, like, subscribe, all of the things. And until we see you guys next time, I hope you guys go be freaking awesome.